You can start, Prabhu. Bhaktiman Prabhu, can you hear me?
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Prabhu. Loud and clear. I can see you as well.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction. It's more than I deserve. It's true. It's more than that represents me. So, but it's very kind of you to introduce me today. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Okay, so we'll start today with the Jai Radha Madhava prayers, some introductory prayers, and then we will read some of the verses. We'll discuss some of the themes in these verses. Okay, so Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihar Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihar Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pavlikacharya Sutta Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pavlikacharya Sutta Divine Grace ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pavlikacharya Sutta Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai Namacharya Shraddhas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Krishna Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Radha Krishna Ki Jai Shri Vadnavanam Ki Jai Shri Maiputam Ki Jai Kandaman Ki Jai Mama Tulsi Ki Jai Bhaktidev Ki Jai Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai all glories and devotees, all glories and devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swavatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Savagana Varita Shri Vishakanatamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchane Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vachakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patita Nama Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiriyat Nasta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhagavati Naistake. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, continue our discussion. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, verses 1 to 3. So, we start off with just the Sanskrit, and then we'll read the translation and purports. So, Sutta Uvacha Iti Vitaha Prajadrohat Sarvadharma Vivitsaya Tato Vinam Vinasanam Bhagat Yatra Deva Vrato Apatat. Sutta Goswami said, being afraid of having killed so many subjects on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhishthira went to the scene of the massacre. There, Bhishmadev was lying on a bed of arrows, about to pass away. Purport. In this 9th chapter, as it is willed by Lord Sri Krishna, Bhishmadev will impart instructions to King Yudhishthira on the subject of occupational duties. Bhishmadev will also offer his last prayer to the Lord on the verge of passing away from this mortal world and thus become liberated from the bondage of further material engagements. Bhishmadev was endowed with the power of leaving his material body at will, and his lying down on the bed of arrows was his own choice. This passing away of the great warrior attracted the attention of the contemporary elites, and all of them assembled there to show their feelings of love, respect, and affection for the great soul. Move on to the next verse. So, verse 2. Tadate prahatara sarve sada sarve svarna pushitahe anvagajan ratha vipra yasadhauma yatayastata. At that time, all his brothers followed him on beautiful chariots drawn by first-class horses decorated with gold ornaments. With them there were Vyas and rishis like Domya, the learned priest of the Pandavas, and others. So the third verse. Bhagavanapi viparshe yathena sad dhananjaya satir vyachavata naipaha kuvera iva guyakehe. O sages amongst the Brahmanas, Lord Sri Krishna, personality of Godhead, also followed seated on the chariot with Arjuna. Thus King Yudhishthira appeared very aristocratic, like Kuvera, surrounded by his companions, the Guyakas. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Sri Krishna wanted the Pandavas to be present before Bhishmadev in the most aristocratic order, so that he might be pleased to see them happy at the time of his death. Kuvera is the richest of all demigods, and herein King Yudhishthira appeared like him, Kuvera, for the procession along with Sri Krishna. For the procession along with Sri Krishna was quite appropriate to the royalty of King Yudhishthira. Okay, so we'll look at these 3 verses, but before we do that, we have to understand the context of these verses. We have to understand the position of Bhishmadev. So, Bhishmadev, we hear about Bhishmadev in the Mahabharata. Bhishmadev is one of the 12 Mahajans. Mahajan, Mahajan means great authorities. So Bhishmadev, the background of Bhishmadev is also important to understand, to get an idea of what is actually going on in the life of Bhishma. So Bhishma was the only son of the virtuous king Santanu, and King Santanu loved Bhishma dearly and gave him the best training, sent him to the sage Vasishtha to learn spiritual science, and to Parashuram, an incarnation of God, to learn military science. And Bhishma matured into a greatly powerful and pious warrior. So a dutiful son, Bhishma tried to please his father in all respects. So once King Santanu, his father, fell in love with a certain fisherman's daughter of striking beauty. The king wanted to marry the girl, but her father wouldn't allow it unless his daughter's future could ascend the throne. Santanu couldn't agree, since Bhishma was his firstborn. To resolve the impasse, Bhishma promised never to accept the throne. But the fisherman still refused, thinking that Bhishma would marry and have a son who could become king. At that point, Bhishma vowed never to marry. Everyone was awestruck, since it was unheard of for a member of the warrior caste to remain celibate. The fisherman then gave King Santanu the hand of his daughter, and the king was so pleased with Bhishma that he gave him the boon of being able to die at a time of his own choosing. Thus we see that despite hundreds of wounds, Bhishma remains alive in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So after the death of his father, Bhishma played a major role in the affairs of the Kuru kingdom. He managed a kingdom where there was successional crisis. He also arranged the marriage of his nephews and tried to bring peace between his grandnephews, the Kauravas and Pandavas. On the battlefield, Bhishmadev was felled in battle by Arjuna, pierced by innumerable arrows, with Shikandi in front. Bhishma did not even look at that direction. Arjuna shot arrows at Bhishma, piercing his entire body, as he was preordained because of Mahadev's boon, which he was booned on by, that she would be the cause of Bhishma's fall down, Bhishma's death. Shikandi, that is Amba reincarnated, was the cause of Bhishma's death. So on the battlefield, what actually happened was that a savage fight ensued between Arjuna and Bhishma, because Bhishma had made the promise that he would never fight in front of a woman, because Shikandi in his past life was a woman. He wouldn't fight Shikandi, and so Shikandi, in one sense, was like a shield in front of Arjuna. So Shikandi wanted to kill Bhishma because of the issues that had been there in the previous life. So they both started shooting arrows at Bhishma there. Now Bhishma there, the arrows of Shikandi were not as lethal as the arrows of Arjuna. So Arjuna was also fighting with lethal intent, and he fired so many arrows that in the end it became overwhelming, to the extent that his whole body was attacked with arrows, and thus he fell. So as Bhishma as Bhishma fell, his whole body was held above the ground by the shafts of Arjun's arrows, which protruded from his back and through his arms and legs. And seeing Bhishma lying on such a bed of arrows, humbled with even the gods who watched from the heavens in reverence, they silently blessed the mighty warrior. When the young princes of both armies gathered around him, inquiries if there was anything they could do, he told them that while his body was laying on the bed of arrows above the ground, his head hung unsupported. Hearing this, Arjun took 2 arrows and made a pillow so that his Bhishma's head could actually be supported. And it is said that Ganga arose also to quench her son's thirst, because Bhishma was the son of Mother Ganga. So this also brings about some other interesting points in this whole chapter. We start to hear what Bhishma does at the time of death. Because Bhishma was granted the boon of being able to depart from the body any time, we will now see in these verses exactly what Bhishma does. So despite having so many wounds on the battlefield, Bhishma remained alive. And so on hearing Bhishma decided to quit his body, Pandava was accompanied by Lord Krishna and purified souls like Nag, Vyas, Pindi, Sudeposwam, Parashram, and others, followed by the disciples assembled on the sea. The arrival of these personalities was certainly a sign of their great respect and admiration towards Bhishma, a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. And what we'll find is that Bhishma will then glorify Lord Krishna in this chapter. Also, while speaking to Maharaj Yudhishthira, Bhishma praised the exalted position of Krishna. He refers to the Lord as the original personality of Godhead, the first Narayan. Thus he knew well that Krishna is the source of Narayan. He even knew him to be the Paramatma dwelling in everyone's heart. So we can see that Bhishma was very learned about spiritual life and knew about the position of Krishna himself. Although the Lord is equal to everyone, he is more inclined to the devotee who is always surrendered at his lotus feet. Bhishma praised the Lord for exhibiting devotee by graciously coming before him at the time of death. And now he expressed his desire to constantly see the Lord, absorb his mind in thinking of him, and quit his body in that condition. So then we will also hear more detail about Bhishma's prayers. So as the time of Uttarayan approaches now, this is the time where the sun travels to the north. Bhishma will stop speaking and he withdraws his mind from everything and fixed his wide-eyed opens upon Lord, wide open eyes upon Lord Krishna. He then offers his heartfelt prayers to the Lord, the object of his attraction. Lord Krishna had promised not to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, but Bhishma, in order to break Krishna's promise, attacked Arjuna in such a way that Krishna was obliged to take up a chariot wheel and rush at him to protect Arjuna. Thus the Lord did not mind breaking his own promise to protect both Arjuna and to protect and to fulfill Bhishma's vow. This is quite interesting because Srila Prabhupada comments on this. He points that actually Duryodhana complained to Bhishma that you're not fighting so vigorously in the battle. and you alone could put these Pandavas, you could actually kill the Pandavas yourself. So he challenges Bhishmadev. So Bhishmadev then then comes to the resolve that okay, so tomorrow I will kill the Pandavas. I will destroy Arjuna. So please keep these arrows safe with you. So Duryodhana is entrusted with some arrows that Bhishmadev will use to destroy the Pandavas. So what happens then is Krishna becomes aware of this and then instructs Arjuna to visit Duryodhana's camp in the evening. In the evening, the time is where both camps can actually meet and not have any quarrel with each other, but resolve any issues. Duryodhana was also a very charitable person, and would also then. So when Arjuna came to his camp, he said, "What do you want? You can have anything you want. If you want, I can stop this fight right now. You just tell me." Arjuna said, "No, I do not want to stop this war. I'm not here for this. But give me those arrows." So Arjuna is then given those arrows that were supposed to be used to destroy the Pandavas. So Bhishmadev becomes aware of this. And then Bhishmadev makes the resolve that now, because Krishna has made me break my promise, I'm going to make him break his promise. And so what happens? A deadly assault on the Pandavas happens the next day, to the extent that Arjuna's life is in danger. And then to the extent that at any point Arjuna is going to be killed. At this point, Lord Krishna intervenes and jumps off his chariot and like a lion runs after Bhishmadev, charges towards Bhishmadev's chariot. And as he charges towards the chariot, his yellow cloth becomes loose, and this is a sight for Bhishmadev to see Krishna breaking his promise. So Krishna takes up a chariot wheel, rushes at him to finish off Bhishmadev. Bhishmadev is prepared to be killed by Lord Krishna, but it is at that very moment that the day of the fighting ends. So it's a very interesting scene, and Bhishmadev is successful in making Krishna break his promise, but because he's a devotee of Krishna, Krishna does not mind breaking his own promise to fulfill Bhishma's vow. So this is a wonderful, interesting pastime that we can actually understand, that even so a devotee will always be protected by Krishna in all circumstances, and his promises will also be fulfilled. So it's a wonderful thing, and this also goes to show that even though Bhishmadev was on the side of the Kauravas, he was also seen as a devotee by Krishna himself. So that's an amazing insight into devotional life as well. So as a great fighter, pure devotee Bhishma was relishing the relation of Krishna in a chivalrous humor, and Krishna felt the piercing of Bhishmadev's sharpened arrows, like a devotee worshipping him with soft rose flowers. That's a wonderful thing to be able to for a devotee like Bhishma relishing the chivalrous. Now, the chivalrous humor is known as is one of the secondary rasas. There's 5 primary rasas, and there are 12 secondary. Seven secondary rasas. Okay. So seven secondary rasas are showing anger on Krishna, wondering about Krishna, making comedy, chivalry, honor, kindness and courage, merciful relationship, dread, great feared, dreadful, ghastliness, shock, revulsion or horror. We also hear about how Bhishma attains Vaikuntha. So thus Bhishma would imagine himself in the Lord with his mind, speech, sight, and actions, and quit his material body and consequently entered the spiritual realm in one of the Vaikuntha planets, where the Lord in his eternal form of Partha Sarathi resides. And in this connection, Srila Prabhupada writes in his purports to Srimad Bhagavatam, the stage attained by Vishnu by quitting the material body is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because he merged himself into thinking of the Lord and his mind into remembering his different activities. He chanted the glories of the Lord, and by his sight he began to see the Lord personally present before him, and thus all his activities became concentrated upon the Lord without deviation. This is the highest stage of perfection, and is possible for everyone to attain this stage by the practice of devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada comments on this point. So now this leads us into asking the question, are we prepared for death? So in the Bhagavad Gita, we find in chapter 8 a series of verses about what to do at the time of death. And we hear this verse, Antakale Jamam Jamam Eva Smaran Mukva Kalevaram Yaprayati Saman Bhavam Yati Nasti Atra Samsya. Anyone who quits his body at the end of life, remembering me, attains immediately my nature, and there is no doubt in this. So Bhishmadev had the boon to give up his body at the time of his choice, but still he was very conscious to not forget the Lord even for a moment. And he was fortunate enough to have the Lord by his side at a crucial point of his time, the time of his life. Therefore, we should be always prepared to face this final exam of our life, like Bhishmadev. The unique situation at Bhishmadev's time of life can be attained even though Lord Krishna may not be present. It's possible by practicing Krishna consciousness in our life in different ways, just as chanting the names of Lord, hearing the topics of the Lord, remembering the Lord, worship Him, etc. Then we will be able to think of the Lord even at the time of death by His mercy and go back to His spiritual abode. So just some verses from the Bhagavad Gita that we can reflect on regarding what to do at the time of death. So chapter 8, text 6, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he's the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, who is always a person, who is luminous like the sun, who is transcendental beyond this material nature. One who at the time of death fixes the air between the eyebrows by the strength of yoga with an undeviated mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Persons who are learned in Vedas to obtain Omkar, who are great sages in the renounced order, enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process in which we may attain salvation. So Bhishmadev was also a Naistika Brahman, Naistika Brahmachari, which means he abstained from contact with a woman throughout his entire life due to his promise to his father and to the fisherman. So for that he acquired the boon of being able to die at the moment that he desired. So there's a verse 24 in chapter 8. It says, "Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery god in the light, at the auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north." And this is known as Uttarayan, when the sun travels in the north. And this is the moment of auspiciousness which Bhishmadev departs from his body. That moment comes in this chapter. We will find that the sun travels in the northern direction, and then at that moment, Bhishmadev fixes his mind on Krishna. So in this particular purport, Srila Prabhupada comments, mystics who are advanced in yoga practice can arrange the time and place to leave the body. Others have no control. If by accident they leave at an auspicious moment, they will not return to the cycle of birth and death. Otherwise, there is every possibility they will have to return. However, for the pure devotee in Krishna consciousness, there is no fear of returning. He leaves the body to an auspicious or inauspicious or by accidental arrangement. So it could be considered that Bhishmadev was also known as a mystic yogi simply because of the boon that he was given by the fisherman, because he could arrange the time and place to leave the body. And this was on Kurukshetra when the sun reached the northern point. So Srila Prabhupada also comments about the stage attained by Bhishmadev. This is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because he immersed himself totally in thoughts of the Lord by remembering his different activities, by chanting the glories of the Lord and by seeing the Lord personally present before him. Thus, all his activities became concentrated upon the Lord without deviation. This is the highest stage of perfection, and it is possible for everyone to attain this stage by practicing devotional service. So Bhishmadev is remembered in the Vedic literature for his unparalleled heroism, his great vow of celibacy, and his deep devotion to Lord Krishna. His glorious death confirms Krishna's statements about Gita. The sober person is not bewildered by the change of body known as death, and the self-realized soul is not disturbed even in the greatest difficulty. By fixing our minds on Krishna and serving him during our lifetime, we can, like Bhishma, cross over the ocean of material tribulations and enter the spiritual world at death. So you may also ask the question that if the soul is indestructible, like Bhishma was present on the battlefield, what did what does Prabhupada mean when he says Krishna has already killed him? The first part to the question we can understand is that the soul is indestructible. So how can Krishna kill Bhishma? Well, the soul was not annihilated, it was just the destruction of the material body. The second part of this is that Bhishma was put on the battlefield just like Drona, so that because Krishna is time personified, he is knower of past, present, and future. So he had already decided that Bhishma and Drona should already be killed in this battle. And just by his will, they were already just destined to die, whether Arjuna fought in the battle or not. That is why when Prabhupada means that they were already killed, Krishna himself, this is what is meant by that. And Krishna also himself says later in a later chapter, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, verses 27 and 33, where he shows his universal form, and Arjuna sees all the soldiers being devoured by the universal form in the manifestation of time. So this is what's happening. So later we also find in another chapter, I think it's chapter 7, verse 30, those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and all the methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So these verses are the passing away of Bhishma there is very instructive for human beings and for people in general as to how to pass away from this material world. So just a few reflections on this point. Death in itself death can come at any moment. We don't think of it like that. We think that, oh, I'll become old, or I'll live for so many years, or I'll live forever. We don't have very much of a comprehension of the idea of death. But this comprehension of death is very important, because death is a very painful experience, just like birth, old age, and disease. These are all very painful scenarios. This material world is a place where there is danger at every step, which we've discussed before. Now, when we say that the world is there's danger at every step, there are various considerations you need to make about this. One of them could be that in this material world you could suffer so much that it becomes overwhelming and unbearable, that you can't even think of Krishna. Or conversely, you may be in such opulence and have so many sensory pleasures in your life that again you cannot think of Krishna. And in fact that becomes even pleasure is also seen as dangerous. Sometimes we only see the fearful situations as danger. Like, for example, if there is deadly heat in the summertime, or if there's excessive cold in the wintertime, or if there is or if someone is about to attack you in a very violent way, we only see that as danger. But danger is also in the form of pleasure as well, that we have to comprehend also. In fact, the dangers of pleasure are also explained in Vedanta Sutra, that as we become more engrossed in the bodily concept of life and become subject to the whims of our senses and act in a whimsical manner or act capriciously, as Prabhupada mentions in chapter 5, 5.29, capricious nature. Capricious nature is that we will act whimsically to the demands of the senses. Now, Bhishma Dev was just the opposite, actually, because he was a Naistika brahmachari. And by that example, we can learn so much, and how much of a powerful warrior he became as a result of celibacy. So the pleasures of the senses dull down the brain, actually. This sense gratification, the business of sense gratification, dulls down the brain. You become what is known as alpa medasha. Sumedasha means one who has got good brain substance, and alpa medasha means one who is dull-headed. So in Canto 11, we find Krishna talking about, we find the verse, Krishna Varnam, Krishna Krishnam, Sangam Pangasta Pashta, Vignesan Sakripanaprai, Janti Vishu Medasha. There is a series of verses which glorify and present the Sankirtan movement in this material world, which we shall discuss in a little while. But the dangers of this material world is uncommon to say that pleasures and sense gratification is also dangerous. It's an uncommon consideration. But the pleasures of the senses mean duality for the person who engages in such matters. Duality, as in engaging in the non-dual substance. The non-dual substance. Non-dual substance brings more and more anxieties and frustrations in this material world. So to come out of this, we have to understand the non-dual substance, which is Krishna, the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, also known as Bhagwan, also known as Brahman, and also known as Paramatma. Bhagwaniti, Brahmaniti, Brahmaniti, Brahmatmati, Bhagwaniti, This is how we understand the absolute truth, the non-dual substance. So, like I said, I was just mentioning the point that pleasure, the dangers of this material world is not just to do with the fearful situations or the things that bring us into suffering and anxiety, but also those things that bring us into high levels of enjoyment and opulence and things like this. This is also a source of danger. In fact, to the extent that we could actually forget Krishna in his entirety, we could actually forget him to the extent that our whole life can pass by and that we can have no remembrance of Krishna. This is the issue with opulence and pleasure as well. So death can come at any moment. I recall in my life, two people I know very well died at a very young age, and this was quite a shock in one sense. But when the reasons for their death was that one of them, their heart just stopped beating. The other one, at a very young age, both were around between 25 and 30. They passed away because their heart stopped beating. One had a heart attack and one their heart stopped beating. It makes you think that actually death can come at any time. Now, if death can come at any time, you have to ask yourself, in this life, what was the purpose of this life? What is the actual value of this human form of life? And the value we find in the quotes of Srila Prabhupada, that this human form of life is the purpose of loving Krishna and awakening the objective of this human form of life is awakening love for Krishna. And that is done by the process of Sambandha Gyan, so establishing your relationship with Krishna. So we also understand about Bhishmadev being a warrior, first-class warrior who fought with Godspeed. He was best of men in terms of being able to fight him, Dronacharya. They were warriors, and it goes to show that the spirit of the warrior involves being able to engage in the act of being able to serve but also protect the population. So when Bhishmadev was fighting, he fought very valiantly. Now, how do we relate this idea of courage and the spirit of fight, being able to express that courage in how do we express the spirit? How do we express that in this modern age? So Srila Prabhupada in a lecture I just was listening to that. First of all, you must have enthusiasm. Sometimes in Krishna consciousness, even we lack enthusiasm because we are subjected to so many outside influences that then we internalize those influences and think that those influences are what we should identify with. Srila Prabhupada makes this point very, very clear that without enthusiasm, you're a dead man walking. So express your enthusiasm in Krishna consciousness. That is most wanted. So in the association of devotees, we must be very enthusiastic to be able to cooperate and collaborate with each other and associate very nicely in loving dealings. And one of the great things we need to consider is how those relationships actually work. The relationships is a very important aspect of Krishna consciousness. There's a wonderful book by a Grace Devki Devi Mataji called Sheltering Relationships. What this means is being able to see happiness in other devotees flourish in their devotional service. By giving engagement and be actively supporting devotees, we are then engaged in this cooperation and sheltering relationships. Sheltering relationships is actually to do with understanding who your seniors also are and who your gurus are, your shiksha gurus, your diksha gurus, and forming relationships with them also. So there are four different types of relationships we have with different types of people. So with the which I won't go into right now, but the point being is that with regards to being in the association of devotees, the idea is to have relationships that allow devotees to actually flourish and become better versions of themselves. In the Bhagavad Gita, for example, where Krishna says, one who explains this science to the devotees, pure devotional service is guaranteed. So would it not be nice to be able to create or be part of something where we can support devotees to see that their devotional service increases also and they are engaged very nicely. So engagement is very important. Now, Bhishmadev was a military man, so we can learn a lot from him actually. that in military science, you need to know strategy, you need to know tactics, you need to know how to how to advance, and you need to know how to defend as well. So these techniques of how to do these things are very was something Bhishmadev was very expert at, because he was a warrior. So the warrior has a very laser-like focus on his objectives, and just like that, in the mission of Srila Prabhupada, we also can have very nice sadhana, and by developing our sadhana, we become very strong in our Krishna consciousness, which then overflows. And if it overflows, and as it overflows, we can actually start giving this to others. Yesterday, we had a wonderful Sankirtan program, but the weather was dismal. It was cold, it was wet, it was raining, and at every moment I did not want to. I felt it was going to be very difficult to distribute books, but then I remembered this idea, that this point about Bhishmadev fighting in the war, fighting for the sake of fighting on religious duties, fighting for the fact that he was trained as a warrior, and Arjuna was also trained as a warrior, so his duty was to fight. So in Krishna consciousness, we also have various duties. And one of the duties, which was very dear to Srila Prabhupada, was to distribute books on Krishna consciousness. And he also called it the Haya Kirtan, which means to distribute the kirtan that's actually in the books, in the kirtan of Bhagavatam, the kirtan of Bhagavad Gita, so that others can experience self-realization, God realization for themselves, and make a difference to their lives. So even in book distribution, even in Harina, we need strategy, we need collaboration, and we also need great cooperation from devotees. It's a great opportunity to be able to fulfill some of the objectives of Srila Prabhupada. And some of these objectives are actually very lofty. They're very lofty objectives. But the point, and I heard this lecture with Vrindavan Prabhu, that if we don't have lofty objectives, then we're going to have very shallow objectives. Or we may not have any objectives at all. So having objectives gives us the direction that we need to feel satisfied that we are fulfilling on our duties. So it could be that we have there's so many different varieties of service. So understanding those objectives are important. Srila Prabhupada in the same lecture commented that there are two types of sadhana. One is deity worship, and one is the Sankirtan Yajna. And of the Sankirtan Yajna, we lean towards the Sankirtan Yajna. That is not to say that we don't follow deity worship or anything. No, that's just as important. In terms of our mood and mission, it is towards the Sankirtan Yajna. And the Sankirtan Yajna is not by any individual in our movement. It's actually been ordained by Lord Chaitanya, and also through the Guru Parampara. So we can create plans and strategies to distribute the holy name and distribute Krishna consciousness, like warriors, like Bhishmadev, like Arjuna. like the great fighters assembled on Kurukshetra. That way we can live the teachings of Bhagavatam in our everyday lives. And it's when we become slackened, then it becomes very difficult to make a conscious effort to actually touch the pavement, even if you don't but have some kind of regularity where at some point you can engage with the devotees out on Harinam, or give them a support, give them some sort of support that will enable them to distribute and also give more to others in Krishna consciousness. So just to sum up then, we'll learn a lot about how how Bhishma passes away from this world. We hear about his instructions to Yudhishthira Maharaj about how to govern the world, and the people in general. We learn also about how Bhishma fixes his mind upon Krishna when the sun moves towards the north, and we'll also be able to try and take some things away from these learnings and engage and use them in our own very lives. The fact that Vishnu was a very powerful warrior gives us the impetus and inspiration to understand that we can also be part of the solution and not be part of the problem. It was unfortunate that Bhishma was fighting for the Kauravas, but that did not stop him being a devotee of the Lord, which Krishna recognized. That's a wonderful thing that we can take away from that. That even though he was fighting on the wrong side, he was still seen as a devotee of Krishna, like this. So we just need to think about how. So with this idea of the spirit of the warrior, we can use that idea of having a laser-like focus on Krishna, even in our very daily lives. At work, we can meditate on him while we do our work, so that we become efficient at our work, so we can complete on our tasks and jobs for the day stealthily, so that we can spend more time meditating on the Lord, or being engaged in activities that allow us to engage in Krishna consciousness more effectively. So strategy and putting things in place is very important. The books of Srila Prabhupada, they're like little bombs. So when they're released, when they enter the laps of the ordinary citizen, rather than having a devastating effect, they have the diametrically opposite effect on the individual who experiences the things contained in that book. Yesterday, I met two individuals who who bought books, and I was surprised. Two things happened. First of all, I was surprised on such a day that I could distribute any books, and that someone would have also have a meaningful conversation with me to discuss Krishna consciousness. So these two individuals took books away, and we had a very nice conversation. So Krishna arranges the situations. We don't have to be fearful when we go out and distribute books and go out and Harinam. But the point is that we also learn that at that point, that actually the intelligence comes automatically because Krishna arranges that intelligence for you. So we can see how Krishna works in mysterious ways, in different ways. So those books will have a profound effect on those people who actually read them. We just need to be an instrument. And even if we just turn up, then automatically we become an instrument to distributing books, but also engaging in the mood and mission of Srila Prabhupada just by collaborating. Very simple things we can do. We don't have to be very sophisticated about it, but we're very there are very easy processes by which we can actually engage very nicely. And sometimes all we need to do is just turn up, and Krishna will arrange the rest. So it's very easy, and it's very effective. When devotees are out on the streets, it's actually very, very has a very powerful influence on other human beings, because we can have meaningful conversations and things that are, if we can put ourselves in the shoes of other people, we can understand that once upon a time I didn't understand these things, but gradually, after the contact with Srila Prabhupada's books and Srila Prabhupada's Vani, we understand that I am not this body. Who am I? Why am I here? The purpose of life. So we're given a chance, a real chance at understanding this human body, what this body is actually about, and what we can actually do with it. And in the same way, we can actually give that understanding to others, those that are favorable. So we'll meet so many different types of personalities, but those that take to Krishna consciousness, they are very fortunate to be able to receive the mercy. The devotees are known as Kripasiddhas. Kripasiddhas are those that are beggars of mercy, but mercy of the holy name, beggars of the holy name, as opposed to Kripanas. Kripanas are those that have something but do not want to give it to somebody else. That is what the business-minded, in other words. Kripasiddhas mean those that are beggars of the holy name, that want the holy name, but also want to give it to others, and also want to create another generation that also want to give it to others. So it's not just your generation that want to give it to others, but it's also a generational thing that is being taught, that not only do you have it, but you also give it to others, and then you instruct them, giving them instruction to also give it to others. This is actually most wanted. This is actually how we engage others in Krishna consciousness. So thank you very much today for listening to me discuss about Bhishmadev, and hopefully we can all imbibe this warrior spirit, the warrior spirit in our own Krishna consciousness. Bhishmadev was an emblem, was the emblem of the warrior spirit, and so we should also take learning points from Bhishmadev and try and instill it within our lives, and also help others with that same warrior spirit. So thank you very much for attending Bhagavatam today. We'll pause for today and we'll continue next week. Is there any thoughts, questions, or points anybody would like to raise? Please do. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So if there's nothing for today, we can end class today, and I'll hand it back to you, Karuna Chaitanya Prabhu or Santosh Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Bhaktiman Prabhu. Thank you so much for nice class. So many valid points you mentioned. One thing that I liked was the objectives. So we need to have perfect objectives. Otherwise, our devotional life will be shallow. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I request all the participants to share any experiences, any realizations, any comments, or if you have any questions as well. Please come forward.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Hare Krishna, Bhakti Maan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Nice to hear from you.
Please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Vaishnavas, and all glories to you. Thank you, Prabhu, for a wonderful and amazing and inspiring class. The point that really stood out for us is that in our life we have to have an objective, and we have to see what Srila Prabhupada has given us. It's such a wonderful and amazing opportunity and a gift that we have to treasure and we have to protect, like you mentioned, like a warrior. He has to protect so many things. He has to protect the citizens, and here he has to also protect his own life. So in the same way, we need to protect our sadhana. We have to help each other as well, to protect each other and help each other in our Krishna conscious lives. Because as you mentioned, Prabhu, we become too complacent, or we become too set in our ways that we forget, like, what is the goal, what is the purpose of this human form of life, as Srila Prabhupada always says. And this human life is meant for inquiry as to why we are here, what is our purpose. And very inspiring points that you mentioned, Prabhu, that we have to not only study Krishna consciousness, but in the association of Guru and wonderful devotees like everybody here, and we have to inspire each other every day, moment by moment here, that what is the importance and how can we learn and study. And like you mentioned, once we feel that fulfillment, that contentment within ourselves, then we should feel that confidence within and the Lord's mercy and the mercy of our gurus, that we can now give this Krishna consciousness to just be instruments to others. And so there's a point that stood out, as Karuna Chaitanya Prabhu mentioned as well. So many wonderful points that we need to have a strategy for our lives. So same way that every day we are encountering the battlefield of Maya, we need to understand what is the strategy. We need to find resources, like the warriors on the battlefield. They had arrows, they had bows, they had chariots. So we need to turn and see what is our bows, where can we get our armory. So our armory is the association of devotees. Our armory is Srila Prabhupada's books. Our armory is listening, and our armory is our morning program, our chanting. So that's just some points that I want to share with everybody. So thank you so much, Bhakti Prabhu. And very nice class, and have a wonderful and amazing Krishna consciousness.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Sometimes we think Krishna consciousness doesn't involve strategy or planning. I was listening to again a lecture by Vrindavan Prabhu, and one of the things he mentioned, unbelievable, but strategy is a very core part of Krishna consciousness. We sometimes underestimate the need for strategy. a strategy because we think Krishna will do everything like this. But there's Krishna doing Krishna's mercy, and there's you doing something for Krishna. So, so your engagement in Krishna consciousness. So you actively doing something. It's not that you don't have free will. You have free will. But there's two things to consider: understanding it knowingly or unknowingly. If you knowingly know, if you know that I have free will, then there has to be the intention for the strategy. If that's clear, then there's a path that you can follow. But if it's unclear, or if the intention or the strategy is not there, or then unknowingly you'll still follow Krishna consciousness. You still follow your path of bhakti, but you may do it some things unknowingly. It doesn't mean that you'll know everything. You won't know everything. But there are things which Srila Prabhupada has already mentioned, which are knowing, are worth knowing. And when people first come to Krishna consciousness, the process is actually to understand the Goshti and Nindi principle, is to actively be engaged in sadhana bhakti. Now, sadhana bhakti follows quite strict regulation, actually. Without regulation, nothing can actually happen properly. So regulation is something which is very, very part and parcel of the spirit of the warrior, actually. The Kshatriya is very, the Kshatriya mentality is very disciplined. They also have a very laser-like focus. So the idea being is that having objectives, what that allows us to do is to engage in things that we put on the, sometimes we put things in the back of our mind that, oh, I want to do this, but I don't want to do that. And then so much time will pass and we don't do it. And we don't do it, and we don't do it because we've not really realized or understood what those things are, or what those things involve. And that requires strategy, planning. And that's what the previous acharyas were doing. They were planning, strategizing of how this can be actually communicated to the world. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had already done. The groundwork has been done for 500 years. This has been going on for the last 500 years. It's been going on before that also, but intensely it's been going on for the last 500 years. The strategy and the planning, and how Bhaktivinoda Thakur even said, I would like to see Russians chanting Hare Krishna. When will I see that day? Like that. So the strategy and planning has been a whole load of strategy and planning behind what we see today in the Hare Krishna movement. So it's food for thought. So it's nice to try and see if there are ways we can make adjustments, suitable adjustments to being an instrument in this supreme transcendental movement. That brings the highest welfare of all, is the highest welfare of all, distinguished from illusion. So these are things that we can learn from. So Hare Krishna, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your comments, Nara Prabhu and Chaitanya Prabhu. Thank you very much. Okay, so if we pause there, that's okay.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Ramsha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
His Grace Bhakti
Karuna Chaitanya Prabhu,
Jai.
if you can send the link for the recording today, would be most appreciated.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, I'll send the link.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, it's a wonderful class. Thank you. Hari Bol.
Hare
Thank
Krishna,
you.
Prabhu.
Hare
Thank you for
Krishna.
a wonderful class.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for a wonderful class.